So typically I don't really lay out my videos completely the same way I'm going to do with this video, but I'm going to try something a little bit different this video and see how it works out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off some of my subtopics, and then each time I finish a subtopic I'm going to try to rank it, because seems to be a little bit more of a series that it's easier to rank, I guess, the actual aspects of it than other series would be. Because the 5 or 6 main topics I really want to talk about are general things that every story has, and I feel like with Black Clover some of them are done really well and some of them are done decently well. So starting off with the characters. The characters are definitely nowhere near perfect, but they also aren't the worst I've ever seen. While the characters are definitely interesting in a sense, they sometimes come off as annoying and sometimes unnecessary. Starting off with one of the things that I think everybody's going to mention when talking about Black Clover is how annoying Asta was right at the beginning of the series. Because this guy, all he did was yell, but at the same time you kind of appreciate how hard he's trying, but it's just, you can't get over the yelling. Most people just drop the show just because of how much Asta yells. And that's more of a thing where I think it kind of depleted. Not sure if it was more because that the anime realized that people weren't liking it, because it was more of a voice acting thing. So I think that the anime realized that no one was really liking it, so they kind of toned it down. But also as a character, Asta started to grow a little bit more and started to try to deal with his problems some other way than just yelling. I'm just going to chalk it up to that, but other than that, I think Asta's a decent character. He has a motivation, he has the story to him that kind of teaches people a lesson, which is something that in shonen is very important, I feel like, and they always try to do it with shonen characters. He has a backstory, and there's some lore, I think, that comes from what Asta's origin is, because Asta and Yuno, being orphans, dropped at the same time at the orphanage in, what was it? Hajj Village? I think that's what it was called. Now, I've seen some theories saying that Asta might be a dwarf, and originally my friend told me that Asta's a dwarf, and I thought he was serious, it was confirmed, and I just missed it or something. I went to go search it back later a couple months ago, I think, and it turns out that was never confirmed. It was just dropped that there were dwarves, and then there was a theory going around that Asta may be a dwarf. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know down in the comments. But there's also the thing with Yuno and the elf, and I think that, I don't really know if it's confirmed or something, but Yuno seems to be an elf. Or at least what I got from it is either the descendant of an elf, or the descendant of the son or daughter of Licht and whatever the other guy was, the 2 main elves. Thing that I know a lot of people like about tsunderes is that they are a little aggressive, yet they're cute. Something that I never liked about Noelle is she, one, doesn't look the cutest, as in looks back. It's more of my preference maybe, but she doesn't look the best. And the way she acts as a tsundere is a little less cute and more a little annoying, and I feel like that's probably why I really dislike Noelle. But there are characters in Black Clover within the Black Bulls that I really like. Within, you take Zora, who is probably one of the best developed characters in Black Clover, period, even though, as of the anime, there's barely any development. It's just, what we've been shown about him just makes it so deep and so interesting about him, and, you feel bad for the guy. It's an interesting way to take that commoner, I guess, blood, or, that commoner stigma, and instead of taking it the typical boring way that everything seems to do it, it kind of takes that different path with, a little more of a, instead of I'll work so hard I'll beat you, more of a I'll work smarter and beat you. Which is why I find Zora's magic really fitting for him, as the trap magic would really require you to be smart. So in terms of characters, I'd give it a solid 6. This is compared to Shonen, by the way. Shonen characters is a 6. In terms of characters in general in anime, I'd give it more of a 4 or a 5. It has interesting characters, just not the greatest I've seen. Now with the lore is definitely expanding. It's nowhere near the lore of Naruto or One Piece or some of the other big anime. Don't get me wrong though, there definitely is lore and it definitely seems to be interesting, just enough to keep me wanting to watch more just so I can learn it. It's just definitely not the main thing that I'm trying to pay attention to while watching Black Clover. For me, I'd give the lore within Black Clover more of a 4 to 6, in that kind of range. Same thing with the characters. It isn't the greatest, but it's definitely there. With like the elves and the demons and like the dwarves, and like there is this sense of lore, the history. It is interesting, so I'd give it a decent 5. Let's put it at 5. Now we can move on to like the relationships between the characters, and I feel like this, although it seems to be done well, there definitely isn't much of it. Within the relationships between the characters, you definitely see that familial bond between all the Black Bulls, but there isn't much more of a deep relationship. It just seems really base, a thing that every shonen would do where like, we're family. You could just go watch Fairy Tail if you wanted really to do something like that, you know what I mean? It doesn't have this extra layer to it that I think would put it above a level 5, which is what I'm probably going to put the relations at. While there definitely is other relations outside of the Black Bulls, it's very minimal within like what's the frickin' like Foyolion's sister? I don't know how to say her name, man. It's difficult. His sister and his younger brother, or whatever there is, like Leo or whatever his name is. Like there definitely is those relations. There's the relation between Noelle and her brothers, or I guess all her siblings. There definitely are those relations, but there aren't half as important or half as deep, half as interesting as the like Black Bulls. And even within there, it's not very much. It's solid 5 again. So that's 3 ranks where I put them at a 5. So characters, lore, and relations, I'm putting those at 5, which isn't very good yet. Which is something that's weird because I enjoy Black Clover a lot. And I don't know if I can really put it on this pedestal of being a good anime without actually thinking of reasons. And I can't really think of more reasons to why I could put them higher, but now we get into the good part. I kind of left the best for last. So we get to story. The story in Black Clover is definitely a good one. It's nowhere near as boring as, say, My Hero Academia's story, where it's basically over. The story is over in itself. It's more now just following what happens with the characters. Although I like My Hero Academia, it kind of gets boring after like season 2, or it kind of starts declining. I mean, sure, the manga's probably really good from what I've seen, but as of the anime, it's kind of declining. With Black Clover, which I feel like is a decent anime, it takes the story, and no matter what you want to say about it, you can't say it's not enjoyable. The story itself, ignoring Asta's yelling, I know someone's going to mention that. The story itself is interesting because you see this underdog character, I guess, that everyone really likes, and it's more of a thing that you just want to see him prove everyone wrong, because you see all these douchebags at the top in the royal realm. Within even the map itself and the geography, there's the royals in the middle, and then it kind of expands out to the more dangerous places like the common realm and stuff. And it's an interesting way where you want to see the character develop and grow and destroy these assholes and put them in their place, kind of. And the adversities that he has to go through, or I'm just referring to Asta, the adversity he has to go through are very interesting and kind of seem not very generic, you know what I mean? There are plot twists, they aren't very major, something that blows your mind, you're like, oh my god, I just didn't expect that. But they're definitely not things that are generic, and they're a little more interesting than I feel like a lot of other shonens do. I'm comparing this a lot to shonen, because shonen kind of seems like its own genre when it comes to anime. It's more of that like beginner but also good kind of anime, I guess. And with the story of Black Clover, you start with a kid, and this kid has no magic, and you wonder why, but you end up like probably figuring out later. But what happens is you have this kid, and he gets bullied for not having magic, and this world is just developed on magic. So when this boy tries to do anything, everyone kind of does it better than him, and everyone makes fun of him for it. So when you see him train his heart out and actually try to work hard for it, it makes it feel satisfying. Something that Naruto definitely kind of dropped which a lot of people have mentioned a lot of times, is how Naruto's supposed to be about this underdog who kind of works hard to get what he wants, yet he has this nine-tailed fox. He was the son of the Hokage. He's the reincarnation of the two strongest shinobi in the world, and it's like, well, at this point now he's just natural talent. Like, they just proved himself wrong. But within Black Clover, it seems kind of the same thing with like the anti-magic thing, where like he kind of gets this natural given destructive gift, I guess. But at the same time, Asta actually works hard, and you see it a lot. And that's why I think the yelling is kind of well deserved. Because if you were to be in that situation where you worked that hard, and if you weren't excited or like, I guess, in the same kind of mental state as Asta would be all the time, it'd be a little weird, you know what I mean? I feel like he deserves his right to yell, even though that sounds weird. It just kind of works. For story, I'm gonna give this a 6 or 7. I'm gonna put it at a 7. 7 seems good. I'm pretty harsh with my ratings unless it comes to One Piece, which I'm completely biased about, so don't rank me. So starting with the Black Clover themes, it's a lot of little things that come together and kind of like and cultivate this like grander thing, which is a lot more interesting than when you have one big theme and that's all you take care of. Usually the best kind of sort of way to deal with themes is have a major theme and then have some sub like plots and sub themes that kind of like link together and expand and diversify how you kind of tackle that theme. Like for Black Clover, it usually takes like with not necessarily racism but discrimination in general, and it does a good job of it by making it interesting and making you want to see the like, I guess, discrimination end. Although it's not like, for example, Vinland Saga, where it takes that dark route, it definitely has this darker side to it, but definitely nowhere near like Vinland Saga or anything like that, where like it has more of a realistic tone towards themes. But it has this kind of charm that makes it more romanticized, but at the same time still serious. With the theme of discrimination, it's a lot of like the royals who are blindly just hating the commoners for no reason without knowing, just because they think they're better, and it makes it kind of a shallow feeling. But when you look at the designs and the way these characters act, like the royals I'm referring to, they do seem shallow, which makes sense, and it makes it a little bit more interesting and believable, at least, that these characters be like this. And it seems that even though there's a lot of discrimination, there are definitely people who know what they're doing, like for example the Wizard King, who I'm pretty sure is a royal, and there's obviously a couple royals here and there who don't really discriminate against like commoners, but for the most part, like the king, whatever his name, like Augustus Clover, whatever his name is, he definitely discriminates against like commoners. And even within that like theme, they have like subsections where they kind of look at where the commoners themselves still side against Asta and his group, because it's kind of more of a hierarchy. The royals discriminate against the peasants, and the peasants discriminate against those with least magic within the peasants. So people like Asta who have no magic are discriminated against even by those commoners that are in the same boat as them, which makes it like a little bit more of a layered system, where if Asta has to prove himself, he has to prove himself to the first layer and the second layer and the third layer, which kind of keeps you going within the story, and you keep wanting to see more of the theme unraveled and explored. So in terms of themes, I'm going to give this a solid 7 or 8. Let's go 7.5. I know this is kind of like a sub kind of topic that I want to touch upon, but it kind of links into most of the other things, and I think this is why Black Clover is probably the most fun to watch new shonen, at least in the more recent era, and it's just a feeling of satisfaction. With shonen, a lot of people who watch it who aren't just beginners, just like anyone in general, when they watch shonen, one of the things that they want the most is that just feeling of just straight hype and satisfaction. And although My Hero Academia definitely does that well, I feel like Black Clover does it in a more collected and calm manner, like a proper kind of manner. And the way it satisfies you isn't blatantly obvious, and it has a reason. Like with My Hero Academia, there's a lot of hype, but it's built up by small elements that build up to this one point, but that one like major point is only hype because, like, for example, it's One For All. He's been built up this whole time. But within Black Clover, there's these mini satisfactions where, like, you see Asta prove the royal wrong. There was that satisfaction coming out because you saw Asta prove a royal wrong. And it doesn't seem to matter how big or small it is, it's always fun to watch Asta prove a royal wrong. Even if it's not a royal, he gets to prove other people wrong, and that just feeling of when you're right just leaks into you. Like, the feeling of when Asta's right kind of seeps into you when you're watching it, because you're watching a main character that you can enjoy and relate to in a sense, because everyone has been, like, in some sense discriminated against for the most part. I'd say 98% of people have seen this sort of discrimination happen against them. There are obviously people who maybe have less been discriminated against less than other people, but everyone can relate to this theme because it's such a major theme and something that happens around us a lot, and you can see it on the news all the time. And I feel like because of that, the theme itself is very broad and everyone can relate to it. The satisfaction of seeing Asta just go against it is very high and very easy to achieve. So with satisfaction, I give it a solid 8 because it has these mini satisfactions. Although they're not really big, they're still really fun to watch, and you're constantly happy, like, whenever this small thing happens. Like, I remember there was a scene where I think Asta just proves the royals wrong at, like, a banquet, and I'm just, like, so hyped, and I'm like, I just started thinking about it, I'm like, this is the tiniest thing ever, and all he did was, like, I think yell something out loud, and it's like, that's still fun to watch for some reason. So in terms of an anime, I'd give it a solid 7.5, because I know I just rated, I think, like, 3 of the things 5s, I think, or something like that. It's like characters, lore, and relations. I ranked them all like 5s, but I feel like the themes and the story and the satisfaction all, like, ranked that, like, a little more to the higher side because it's a lot better. Hey, if you like the video, consider dropping a like, consider subscribing. This is the Green signing out. Peace.